Well, we're always looking for advantages in fantasy football, and Sigmund, the NFL schedule has been released, and well, every year I love looking at the fantasy playoff schedule. Now it's different now with 18 weeks and all that. But Sig, it's a yearly tradition for myself, and I thought it'd be a fun exercise because I love looking at the end of the season. And yes, lots of things could change, but I want to see who's got the easiest schedule at the end of the season. It's something I've always done. Not sure how accurate it is. Well, let's
Yeah.
have some fun today now that the schedule's been out, huh?
Yeah, the great thing about this season is there's also, by the way, a lot of best ball contests where you're not just trying to be the best out of 12, you're trying to be the best out of hundreds or thousands to win a big jackpot. And it's based on, just like the high stakes contest, it's based on the final winner, how teams do in the fantasy playoff. So there's a lot of implication to this. And what makes it fun, Cease, is we're looking ahead. And of course, we know that schedule based fantasy analysis is much better in the season when we have an idea of how teams have changed for the better or worse on offense and defense than
Yes.
it is before the season. But we're going to do this analysis now, Cease, and so many things are going to happen by the time we get to December that we're not even going to look back and see whether it was accurate or not. Let's have some
Right.
fun now. And it also just gives us a chance to talk about what teams, what players we're excited about, and even have more reasons to be excited about.
Yeah, more reasons to be excited about. And for me, it comes down to some tiebreakers. If there's some early drafts right
Sure.
now, people are drafting right now. So, what are some of your tiebreakers and maybe something to even bump up and elevate some of the darlings of our hearts? Because I've highlighted three teams with the best fantasy playoff schedule. And first off, I'm speaking to the team that's on your shirt. Thank God you're wearing the Lions shirt today
Oh, I
because,
do.
yeah, I think there's a little bump for the Detroit Lions, and I love how they look at week 15, Detroit at the LA Rams. So that's going to be, a hell of a start there. They finished week 17 at Minnesota. So I'm looking at potential high scoring matchups, and I'm trying to avoid late schedule, like outdoor, games in New England, games in Buffalo, where weather could be a factor. So with the Detroit Lions, I like the way that they're shaping up at the end of the year, which just adds an extra bump to the players that we already love, Bloom.
Yeah, we saw last year Jared Goff, indoor Jared Goff. He only had 3 outdoor games. Remember that? There's going to be more than 3 outdoor games, but not during the fantasy playoffs because, as you said, Cease, they traveled to the Rams. And then that middle game, week 16, the Steelers come to the Ford Field, and then they go to Minnesota. And, Cease, there was a time maybe that we'd say, ooh, Steelers, I think the offense, now we're going to see about what the Lions offense looks like without Ben Johnson calling the plays.
Right.
But we've seen the Steelers famously match up linebackers on Keenan Allen. We've seen the Steelers do some things on defense that just don't make sense. I have a feeling that the Lions are going to be able to identify those things and exploit that. So, yeah, I think this is absolutely a lineup of games where if you already liked your Detroit Lions, you should like them even more. Like you said, there's no weather element. And also, we've seen the Lions coaching staff adapt, change as the season goes on, embrace players that are coming on in larger roles. So, yeah, this is a team that we think should be peaking by December.
Yeah, peaking by December, hitting all cylinders. So let's go with your Lions. And you saw our beautiful thumbnail. You saw Baker the Baby Maker on there because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, check this, week 15 versus Atlanta. Let's put a pin in the Falcons for just a little bit. Week 16 at Carolina. And with Carolina's offense being able to put up more of a fight, like I like that one for the Buccaneers. And then week 17 at Miami. So if you're Tampa Bay and you go, hey, Atlanta, Carolina, Miami. Now, two of those are on the road, so you're away from your comfy confines down there in Tampa Bay. But still, I like that matchup for all three. And yes, for me, Bloom, it's not just Baker, our guy, and it's not just Bucky Irvin, who I love, and all those wide receivers, but a tiebreaker for Amika Ibuka on one of
Mm.
those. Like, yeah, I'll bump that up a little bit now based on this fantasy playoff schedule.
And Chris Godwin should be back to 100% by then. Maybe Chris
Yep.
Godwin will start the season slow. But what you like here, going back to the weather angle, yes, 2 outdoor games, but it's Carolina and Miami. So warm confines of those stadiums in December. Atlanta is a team that did make some improvements on defense in the draft. We'll see how much that affects them, but I think the familiarity Tampa has with Atlanta is going to matter there. Carolina had the worst scoring defense in the league last year. They used their first round pick on Teteroa McMillan. Not going to help on defense. So they did get Nick Squirt in the second round, but I don't think you're going to see leaps and bounds of improvement in Carolina's defense. And then Miami, this is a team that is going to be moving on from Jalen Ramsey. They didn't find enough money in the couch cushions to pay Calais Campbell. So this is a defense that is declining. So we didn't really look at Miami as a scary defense. Now we're looking at them as potentially one of the worst defenses in the league. And also, this is a Tampa Bay team, Cease, that we've seen. They'll run up the score. If it's working, they're not just content to sit on the ball in the second half. Baker Mayfield, 40 passing touchdowns last year. You won't get 40 in these three games. You might get 10.
Yeah, he might, and he'll keep slinging it out there. And I said put a pin at the Atlanta Falcons because now it's time to talk about their fantasy playoff schedule, Bloom. And Atlanta is at Tampa Bay, at Arizona, and then versus the LA Rams. So you see some connective tissue here within the schedule between Tampa and Atlanta, but also the Rams being on the Lions playoff schedule, and then the Rams being on Atlanta's should be fantasy championship schedule in week 17. And with Atlanta and Michael Penix, and there's a lot of all up in the videos, I like to say, Bloom, there's been a lot of video analysis about Michael Penix. Like, we don't even know what this offense can be because things were so held back by Kirk Cousins, and we only got a taste of Michael Penix. So imagine a full-blown Zach Robinson offense this year with Penix slinging the rock. Sounds pretty good to me.
Yeah, and again, what we're looking at here is Penix is going to be in his first full season as the starter at quarterback. And what you hope is by December, he's comfortable. And Zach Robinson's comfortable with the offense he has set up for him. He's got chemistry with all of his receivers. Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier are rolling. So, yeah, this is an offense that should be clicking by then. And we're looking at an outdoor game in Tampa, indoor game at Arizona. Their offense, their defense still works in progress. And then the Rams, by the way, if you're wondering, since we mentioned the Rams twice, the in-between game for the Rams is at Seattle. Those games can kind of be like 9-6 street fights. But the other two games, like we mentioned, looking good for Atlanta. And obviously, when we're looking at Atlanta, the fate of all of these fantasy players is going to be based on Michael Penix. That's why there's all that analysis. But we should be excited for Atlanta, especially when we look at the schedule.
It doesn't mean Kyle Pitts, or does it mean Kyle Pitts?
At the price, 12th, 13th round, I'm thinking about it.
Hey, baby. Hey, who loves the value, right? Who loves the bargain? Who loves shopping?
Yeah.
Kyle Pitts going that late?
Yeah. I mean, that's the funny thing about ADPCs is you can look and you can see how the fantasy world, the hive mind is feeling, how they're feeling about players. And there's a certain point where there's a dead cat bounce or otherwise at that price, depending on your strategy at tight end. Geez, can you tell that I'm writing up tight end tiers and value plays coming out of Football Guys today? Check it out. I'm dating the show. But yeah, I think that this is the time that we start figuring out who we think the fantasy world has given up on too early, who they're still too high on. And, some of the things, see, you turn this into a Kyle Pitts show. Look what you did, Cecil. But, we mentioned Michael Penix, like, again, every single player in the Falcons offense, we should say, is Michael Penix adjacent. And look at what Michael Penix did for Jalen Polk's draft value. Look at what Michael Penix did for Roma Dunze's draft value, maybe.
Ooh.
Maybe.
Hot take.
So we've seen Michael Penix inflate the value of players. Maybe Kyle Pitts is next.
Yeah, honorable mention time, because I just want to talk about Jacksonville.
Sure.
In week 17, they travel to face Indianapolis. Now, I have no faith in Indianapolis. I think there's a staff change coming there. I have no faith that they're talking about using Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. It's like, all right, you made the bed with Anthony Richardson, and then you're like, nah, you got crackers in the bed. Like, what? All right. The Daniel Jones thing is perplexing. Again, so we're looking far, far ahead to the very end of the year. But I really want to focus on Jacksonville.
Sure.
And I really want to focus on Travis Hunter. As an honorable mention here, just because, one, he's an outstanding young man. And even though he's a non-quarterback, he's the type of guy to change the culture.
Yeah, he is.
He's the type of player that other players want to play with. And at wide receiver, he's arguably the best wide receiver in this class, depending on what you wanted to say. And he's going to be a receiver that dabbles in corner, at least. Again, looking far ahead. But I think of Jacksonville, I think of how this new look offense could look with Travis Hunter. And he's not the only one, by the way. So just kind of an honorable mention. And
Sure.
just for the finale, for week 17, because Jacksonville at Indy, probably not for the division, of course, because that's Houston's division. And I doubt any wild card comes from the AFC South. But Jacksonville at Indy, I just love the idea of Travis Hunter helping you hoist your fantasy trophy this year.
Yeah, or any number of players from this, what should be very improved Jacksonville offense. And like you said, week 15, Jets coming to Jacksonville, week 16, going to Denver, maybe snowy Denver. But week 17, is this Trevor Lawrence against Riley Leonard? Is this when we see the Colts wave the white flag? Has Shane Steichen been fired by this point? Has the owner said, let's just see what we have in this rookie?
Right.
That's what you're looking at. So, yeah, potentially running the score. Speaking of honorable mentions, I want to mention a few. Houston Texans get Arizona. Now, Vegas and the Chargers, not necessarily the most pushover defenses, but all three of those games are indoors. Cincinnati has Baltimore. Do you remember what the Bengals offense did to the Baltimore defense last year? It was not kind. It was not kind. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Week 16 at Miami. We already talked about them. And then Arizona, week 17.
Yep.
Carolina, if you like them, at New Orleans, Tampa Bay, and Seattle. At New Orleans and 2 games in Carolina. San Francisco has Tennessee, Indy, and Chicago. That's not bad. Arizona, we mentioned a couple of times, so you know that they're going to intersect with some of these. At Houston, Atlanta, at Cincinnati. That game could be like 38. Do you remember the Denver-Cincinnati game late last year where they had like a whole fantasy game of scoring like in the fourth quarter and overtime or whatever it was? And then a couple where I'm like, good schedules, but can they take advantage of it? New Orleans, right? They get Carolina, the Jets, and at Tennessee. But Tyler Shuck is going to be starting, or Spencer Rattler, or Jake Hayner, or Josh Johnson, or I don't even know, Teddy Bridgewater. Indianapolis, at Seattle, San Francisco, and Jacksonville. But as we said, it's an offense that we think is going to have trouble getting out of the driveway. We'll see if those things can change. Put a pin in that. Put a pin in the audible. And also, by the way, tomorrow I'm debuting an article, Cecil.
Okay.
The best road trip to take for all 32 fan bases. You're looking at the schedule. I like to plan my trips. I'm crazy. I'm an old man, I guess, because I plan my trips like 6 months out. You know, you want to get the best hotels, the best plane fares. So you're looking at the schedule that just came out. You're thinking about your fantasy teams. You should also be thinking about a fantasy vacation to a city like New Orleans. Come down and see me, everybody.
Come down and see Sigmund. Come out to the Mile High City and enjoy everything that Colorado has to offer.
See,
I don't know how many times. Yeah, sorry, Joe. How many times anywhere I travel, was in rainy Cincinnati for the Flying Pig Marathon, and everywhere. Where are you from, Colorado? Are you high? Like right now?
Rocky Mountain High.
Are you holding?
How did Stacy do in the marathon, by the way?
You got any papers? Right?
Yeah. You holding? How did Stacy do in the marathon? Congratulations to her, by the way.
Fantastic, by the way.
Great.
So,
yeah.
There you go.
Inspiration. We need our wives are gonna like lengthen our lifespans.
So hopefully.
Yeah.
We're men, so we don't have any. That's not
no hope.
That's not going to be a choice. Anyway, he's Sigmund. I'm Cecil. We are the Audible. Everyone out there, thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned. And would you always please stay frosty?